1. It was 2012. I got my very first apartment with 3 friends. Me and the girl shared a room while the 2 boys shared the other. The girl had us all do a house meeting when we all moved in. She discussed general rules, which were common sense things. She explicitly says that if anyone has a problem with someone or something, just bring it up. Okay, no big deal. However, she quickly became the only one in the house to have issues, and yet she never brought it up. She would just be passive-aggressive and be loud in her semi-silent tantrum, like banging the door closed, stomping, slamming cabinets. The rest of us didn't know if she had issues with us or an outside issue, like her boyfriend. That made her moody because she never adhered to her own rule of confronting an issue if it was house or roommate related. Me and her not only shared a bedroom but a bathroom as well. Over time, I noticed that she didn't wash her hands after using the toilet. Considering I have to touch the same doorknobs as her to go in and out of the room or open the cupboard, I felt it an issue enough to bring up with her in private. You know, as per her rule. Her reaction: attack every single person in the house for what offends her. Me: you leave your water cup on the counter, still using it. Boy 1 always plays his computer games loudly. He uses a headset and our apartment just echoes loudly. Boy 2 doesn't say hello to her when she comes back from class or greet her. What? She proceeds to call me a salty bitch, and for the rest of our time together she continues to be passive-aggressive and gets even worse, stealing money from people's wallets, throwing away something that wasn't trash and wasn't hers, hiding a possession to inconvenience someone else, etc. If I said anything to her about anything, she defaulted to calling me salty. So, I decided to get my petty revenge. She made living with her uncomfortable the second she was ever in the apartment with anyone else. I decided to make her physically uncomfortable. I took some table salt and would sprinkle some in her bedding, enough to make her toss and turn and wonder what the fuck was making her so itchy. Salt, because it doesn't attract ants, was small and white to blend in with her bedding, and because it was a safe enough spice to not stain her sheets or be obvious that it was a kitchen spice. She never got another good night's sleep for long. I'd give her a day or 2 of salt-free sleep to make her think the issue was gone, at least until she pissed me or the others off enough to warrant another uncomfortable night. She never found out what it was. No effort on my side, just a tiny sprinkle of salt every few days all over her bedding. If I'm such a salty bitch, might as well live up to the name. Her restless sleep made her too tired to put the extra effort into her bitchiness and crimes. 2. In my senior year of college, I took a parasitology class. It consisted of, like most college courses, a lecture and a discussion portion. The discussion class was graded separately from the lecture, but at the end of the semester, it was added as a part of the lecture grade. I don't remember the exact breakdown. Part of the discussion class and a big portion of our grade was a group project. Basically, we needed to select a parasite we were discussing in lecture, partner up, usually 2 people per group, but I think 1 or 2 groups had 3 people because of the odd numbers, and because college students can be lazy and not even show up to a class not taking attendance, and read a scientific paper that contributed to the parasitology field. Then we had to summarize the entire paper by breaking it down to a high school level. It was supposed to go on some scientific magazine for youngsters to help them understand new breakthroughs in the scientific field. I had no friends in my discussion class. I just pair up with this one girl that was sitting next to me, Nebula. She seems nice enough, and we make small talk in the first discussion class. She was a science major like me, and she said she had just come from her part-time job on campus. Some kind of desk job in student services or something. She said she's super tired, but the job is chill, etc., etc. Second week or so, we get assigned our parasites. One of our assignments was to find a scientific paper that met all qualifications the TA had assigned to us. We also had to submit the original research paper to the TA, and also a bullet point list of the main points. Cool. I make a Google Doc and share it with her. Now, I'm the type of student that doesn't procrastinate. I hate procrastination. If I have spare time, I will get ahead on all my work. But this is a group project, and I understand not everyone works the same way, but also understand that an upper division science course will mess up your GPA like no other if you don't start working on assignments like this at least the day before. So I work in my part and leave some space so that Nebula can put in her 2 cents. I submit the scientific paper for us. I shoot her an email and tell her, hey, I did XYZ and submitted the paper to the TA. I want to send in the assignment by this time and date, so if you can get your part done before that and let me know, that would be great. The deadline I gave her comes and goes, and no word from her, not even an email. But I checked the shared Google Doc, and she had maybe added 2 short bullets versus my 10. What she mostly did was try to correct wording on my bullet points, and maybe rearrange a few words here and there. Add in a punctuation, omit a word. That pissed me off because 1, that's not contributing at all, and it's very irrelevant. Science courses don't give a shit about grammar, and 2, I take pride in my punctuation and grammar because I'm also a writer by hobby. And I'm pretty damn good at it. But whatever, the deadline the TA gave us is looming over us, so I bit my tongue and submitted the assignment. Next week, more assignments. I send her updates on what I did for my part, and give her a deadline. But now she has the audacity to not only ignore my emails, but also not contribute at all. Fuming, I just add more detail for her part, grit my teeth while adding her name, and submit the assignment. She didn't attend class this week, so I couldn't even get her number. The next week, we even have a couple more assignments. I'm unclear on the details. I think it must have been something like a practice worksheet for peer reviewing, and an outline for what we would be including on the final submission. Again, I make the shared docs and send it to her. She didn't come into the discussion this week again, so I had no way of talking to her about her work ethic. Also, the TA had rejected our first submission of the scientific paper because it didn't have experimental data or whatever, and we had to basically start over. Like, do all the assignments based on a new scientific paper all over again, and the deadline for these assignments was the next day. Needless to say, I was stressed out AF. And like I said, no matter how many emails I sent her, it all went ignored. Now, I know about these kinds of students who pretend they'll work on the project to my face, and instead let me do all the work in reality. I knew her work ethic wasn't going to change. I'm pissed at this point. I already have another group project I had to do in another class, an impending essay and oral presentation, and 2 midterms coming up. I didn't need to also deal with her shit. So after discussion, I go up to the TA for a private chat. First, I show him a new scientific paper to get it approved. He looks it over and approves it. Then I tell him what was going on, that she wasn't doing any work and leaving me to deal with the entire thing, and that she wasn't answering her emails, nor was she coming to classes. I tell him that I'm sick of working for what was meant to be for 2 people. Isn't it unfair that I'm basically working alone while everybody else has a partner that was doing his, her, their part, and maybe an extra body in a group with 3 people? TA agrees, but says he needs proof. I tell him I'll forward him all the emails I sent her and keep CCing him on any other emails I send Nebula. He assures me that students that do not contribute will be reported to the professor and will most likely receive a failing grade for the group project portion. I'm not much appeased because I still have to do all the work, and she'll most likely continue not contributing. I tell him all this. I'm usually a pretty quiet introvert, but I'm a straight shot when I'm pissed and feel wronged. TA says, okay, well, there's this one guy who added to the course slate, and he's working alone. Would you be interested in working with him instead? Duh, I accept on the spot. TA says he'll let Nebula know that she'll be working alone from now on. TA also says he'll let the new guy, Silic, know that he has a new partner and email both of us to connect us. I'm completely satisfied, and leave. Next day, I sit down in front of my assignments. I had already started out on the peer review worksheet and the outline and was probably halfway through it. I'm wondering if I should be the nice and better person and send these to Nebula, since she's working alone now. I can tell she hadn't even opened up the docs at all. Google Doc has an activity function that lets you know who accessed the doc, at what time, and what kind of changes they made. If you didn't know. At this time, the TA had emailed both Silic and me, and Silic had even emailed me first, letting me know that he doesn't check his emails too often, so we should text instead. He had included his number in the email. Already there's a stark difference between him and Nebula. That's when I make the decision. Anger rises up in me again at Nebula's lack of communication and work ethic. She deserved to do every single piece of work I had to do. So even though I could have sent her the 2/3 finished assignments... Oh, did I mention the deadline for the assignments was that day? I promptly unshared her from all the docs so she couldn't access them. I sent her a final email telling her she was a piece of shit, a big fuck you, and a list of all the assignments she had to turn in by herself, which was more than the peer review and outline. I didn't even bother sending her the newly approved scientific paper. Oh, and she'd better hurry because the deadline was in 2 hours. And I very happily went to work on my project with my new partner. Even though I was on a time crunch because I had switched partners so late in the game, I made up for it double time. Silic had no complaints about me and was perfectly happy to share the work he'd previously had to do all by himself. I received an A in this class. 3. When I was 18, I started working in an ice cream parlor and lunchroom. I worked there every high season, the summers and springs. My second season there I got promoted to shift supervisor. More responsibilities, same pay. Every time they needed someone to pick up a shift or start earlier, that person would be me. Cut to my third season. I was starting to take less shit from everyone and generally standing up for myself more. I got a complaint filed against me from a customer because I refused to serve her once we were closed one evening. Instead of talking to me about it, I knew the owner personally, and up until that time I considered her a nice person and she liked me. I started to notice I got less and less hours. When I asked the general manager about it, she swore up and down that it had nothing to do with the complaint. And the business had just been slow. This all kept happening, until I got notice that they had overscheduled a shift, and that I didn't have to work that day. When I dropped by, imagine my surprise that there was someone working who wasn't scheduled because it was busy. I asked the owner to have a conversation with me, and these are some highlights. 1. We don't owe you any answers. 2. You do know there are cameras, right? Someone stole €40 a week before. 3. Did something happen at home because you're acting different this year? After this conversation, I quit right there. Cue PettyRevenge. I happened to know that their AC was ridiculously dirty. I knew this because my now fiancé worked with ACs at the time, and had warned both me and the owner about it. Think mold, dust, etc. in there. They had not done anything about it, and when given the opportunity to get a new system at a very discounted price, they just laughed and said it was too expensive. Guess who anonymously tipped the health department, and guess who had to close for a week while their AC got replaced, and got a pretty hefty fine. I'd warned them about it the second season I worked there, warned them multiple times before I quit. My fiancé also warned them multiple times and offered to fix it for them at a ridiculously low price. I only reported them after I quit. 4. This one is from decades ago. Otherwise it would get me in deep doo-doo. I worked as a truck driver in the mid-90s. The company I worked for, can't name them here, but their favorite color is orange, decided to try out a new pay package. The details were complex, but it basically replaced the standard pay per mile with a set weekly salary, and not a good one. The new package was instituted on a small-scale trial. The company quickly realized that they could make a lot of money if they didn't have to pay their drivers, and the package became the company's standard. Because of the complexity of the package, please don't ask, it took the drivers a few weeks to figure out we were getting screwed. Then we started fighting back. A couple of things you need to understand about a truck driver's work week. There are 4 lines on a DOT, Department of Transportation logbook. Lines 3 and 4 constitute the hours we can work daily and weekly. 10 hours, now 11 driving and day. 70 hours driving and other duties. Line 4, 7-day week. In order to maximize our income, we put as little time as possible on line 4, for which we normally did not get paid, and logged the maximum legal speed on line 3, driving, even if we couldn't actually drive that speed due to weather, traffic, terrain, etc. While this was, of course, illegal and impossible with current electronic logs, it wasn't a secret. As long as your logbook was neat and showed you driving at or under the speed limit, the DOT inspectors wouldn't give you a hard time about it. They had more than enough work with the drivers who were wildly ambushing the rules. Once we were put on salary, weekly earnings dropped off about 33%. We had no incentive to cheat. Example, a run from Portland, Oregon to San Francisco, California is 635 miles. You could log this as 1 day at 550 miles. 55 miles per hour by 10 hours, leaving you 85 miles. 85 over 55 equals 1.75 hours logged the next day. That would leave you 8.25 hours to drive on day 2 after your delivery. Of course, the reality was quite different. There are some 300 miles of mountains along the route. With 45,000-pound load, you only averaged about 35 miles per hour through them. And anyone who has lived in the San Francisco Bay Area can tell you how likely you are to be able to drive 55 miles per hour at 8 a.m. Under the new pay package, we logged it as it actually happened. The result being that I would arrive in San Francisco in time to make my morning delivery, and be out of hours to run for the rest of the day, for which I had to be paid. Not only did the company have to pay me to sit for the day, they had usually booked a load for me that day. It took a while for the load planners to catch on that either had to be covered by another driver or lost entirely. Now, all those things we had glossed over in order to keep moving got tossed into the company gears. You lost 3 hours throwing chains and driving across Mountain Pass at 25 miles per hour. And now you can't make a Friday delivery, so sorry, no more hours to drive. And the receiver isn't open on weekends, not my problem. Cargo receivers didn't much care for it either. A lot of them would use the threat of not being unloaded in a timely manner to force drivers into abusive situations. I can remember with great fondness telling a number of them I didn't care if they ever unloaded me. I got paid the same either way. That got back to the company, but as long as I was complying with the DOT rules, there was nothing anyone could do about it. Also removed one of the big hammers the company would use to threaten the drivers. That is, a reduction in miles dispatched. Fleet managers sure didn't like that aspect of the pay package. All this occurred 6 months before my 3-year anniversary with the company. At the 3-year point, my 401k vested, and I got my last 2 weeks of vacation pay. I figured during that 6 months I just about broke even on what I lost in wages. The salary pay package lasted about a year, before all of the problems it caused forced the company to return to pay per mile. Writing this story out has reminded me of all the other things the company did while I worked there. 5. I, a 31-year-old female, had a very weird group of friends in high school. The if you have friends like this, you don't need enemies kind. One of these girls, Julia, treated me horribly, but in the same breath, would call me her best friend without letting me really have a say in the matter. She would rip me to shreds behind my back, make up rumors about me, etc. It was a very confusing time, and so our cliques stuck together through years of secretly creating drama and disliking each other. In hindsight, all dumb 14-year-old high school girly stuff, but at the time it truly hurt me a lot. Julia had to repeat a grade and change schools, and I cut the friendship off right there. She still had friends at my school, though, and so the rumors continued for years. Even up to my mid-20s, I would hear from people, "Oh, weren't you the girl who slept with XYZ?" Even though I was the most boring, introverted high schooler ever. I learned to shrug it off, but knowing so many people had an awful misconception of me because of Julia was disheartening and anxiety-inducing. There was a good chance people my age had heard of me, even if they had never met me. This weekend, I was back in my hometown and attended an event with some friends, none of which I went to high school with. We were standing at a table drinking wine and enjoying the sun when one of my friends pointed out that a neighboring table kept looking at me. I looked and it was Julia and a whole bunch of other women, quickly turning their heads away. They had been looking me up and down and clearly gossiping. Now, I'm not currently in my best phase. I've gained some weight. I was dressed cute but sloppily and was disheveled and sweaty. I felt self-conscious, and obviously this was not how I wanted to meet a person that I had such a bad history with. But I'm not that boring, introverted high schooler anymore. Nowadays, I'm outspoken, opinionated, and a little bit mischievous when the occasion arises. So I decided it was time to stretch my acting muscles and be petty for once. I went over, all question marks and polite smiles, like, "Hi, I saw you looking, can I help you with anything?" I did not say that sarcastically. I was genuinely being polite. The women looked surprised, and then one of them pointed at Julia and said, "Oh no, Julia here just said you used to go to the same school." I looked Julia right in her face and said super excitedly, "Oh really? The Montessori school?" Which was my grade school. Julia looked really put off. Her face was super scrunched up, and she replied confused, "No," and she said the high school's name. Listen, I'm not an actress, but I know I pulled this off perfectly. I made a surprised, then pensive face and said, "Oh, and your name is?" I could tell Julia was getting irritated. She said her name, and I thought for a second, and then apologized and said, "Oh my goodness, this is so embarrassing. I really can't place you. How long were we in class together?" "Until 8th grade. She looked so uncomfortable at that. She was looking at my face like she clearly wanted to say more, but couldn't tell if I really didn't remember her. It was glorious. I was acting my butt off, sort of smiling apologetically and saying, "Boy, I'm so sorry. That was nearly 17 years ago." But hey, please don't take it personally. I really only remember the names of people I was friends with back then. The other women were all sort of chuckling uncomfortably, and one of her friends even said, "Oh yeah, that happens to me all the time too. I can never place former classmates." We were just laughing a little, and then Julia threw in a really meek, "We were friends." I wanted to laugh at her at that point, but I kept it in and just sort of shrugged and said, "I'm so sorry. I really don't recall. But hey, it was nice seeing you again. I hope you ladies have a nice rest of the evening." The look on her face when I turned away was priceless. I will dream about it for years. I could tell her other friends didn't really think much about the whole interaction, but Julia was clearly embarrassed. So I made sure to wink at her when she passed me to leave the event. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 149. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you shared it around and gave it a like. For some reason, likes seem to count a little bit more than views when it comes to YouTube giving that video the extra push. So if every one of you who watch this video gives it a like, then I'll be retiring by the end of the year. So maybe only half of you, because we don't want me to retire. Okay, let's see. We are on Wednesday. Okay, let's see. Let's go right into Hellfreezer's question of the day. What is a foodstuff that you consider a sandwich that no one else does? Like, for example, a hot dog, a hamburger, a calzone pizza. Hell, even a pizza could all technically be regarded as sandwiches. A pizza being an open-faced sandwich. and I'll do my best to come up with one that isn't food-related for tomorrow's video. Let me know what you think. Leave your answer in a comment below. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.